I would like to welcome everybody to another episode of the House of Bricks podcast, where we feature top athletes, Super Bowl champions, NBA champions, keynote speakers, best-selling authors, CEOs. And today, I am very excited to welcome today's guest. Erin, welcome to the House of Bricks.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you. So for our audience that doesn't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we're going to get into your story, maybe some of the challenges that you've faced, and then ultimately something, even if no one listens to this podcast, I want to learn how to overcome and beat burnout on the entrepreneurial journey. So maybe it's just you and I.
Well, hey, even if that's it, I got you. It'll all be fun.
Perfect. Well, tell us about you.
So my background is all in advertising, marketing, media, communications. I have worn many different hats. I have reinvented myself many different times and have had a pretty cool career in the sort of creative marketing advertising field. I spent the last 6 years as the head of marketing for the largest healthcare staffing company in the country. So a hyper growth company that grew 27x in the 6 years that I was there. And I mean, as you can imagine, staffing healthcare workers during the pandemic was a bit of a stressful situation. And so definitely had my own bouts of burnout, was dealing with team burnout, was dealing with the burnout of all of our clinicians, because we had over 50,000 clinicians working for us, and really just decided to go deep and study burnout. I have a master's from Cambridge in England in social psychology. So I definitely do have a sort of academic background in this a bit, but wanted to dig deeper. And so spent the last few years really interviewing and surveying thousands of high achievers from all different walks of life to figure out how the hell they manage to stay at peak performance without burning out. And have really taken that now all. And I speak all over the world on burnout. I just wrote a book that was released last month, The Type A Trap, 5 Mindset Shifts to Beat Burnout and Transform Your Life. So yeah, doing all things burnout now, trying to help people be able to continue to stay at a level of peak performance, but do it without burning out.
Well, I also have a master's degree in burning out. I just don't know how to get out of it. So, having started 5 businesses over the last 25 years, going in through all the peaks and valley experience of that, I'm a professional burner outer, if that's a word. I dropped out of college after my freshman year, so sometimes I just make words up. But the more confidence you say it with, the more people believe it. So burner outer is a new word that we're going to implement into the English dictionary. But you said something that kind of jumped out at me, 27x growth.
Yeah, we did 9x in about 18 months. It was
okay. And was that
it was intense.
Was that revenue growth or number of people? Revenue. Okay. That's incredible growth. Is there any growth hacks you can share with the audience, how you were able to pull that off?
Well, I mean, I think we were a hyper growth company before the pandemic started. We were already on this massive trajectory, growing like crazy before the pandemic started. But then we were perfectly positioned to staff nurses during the pandemic. And as you can imagine, every hospital in the country was like, holy crap, we need like 100 nurses yesterday, send them our way. So I think obviously the pandemic had a lot to do with the level of growth that we experienced in that really short period of time.
Right time, right place, and the right strategy.
Right product.
Right? Yeah. You have to have all 3 of those working together. And in addition to...
Well, yeah, and trust me, like there were plenty of days where we were like, we don't know what the hell we're doing. We are making this up as we go. We're just trying to survive. I mean, anyone who's listening to this who has been in that hyper growth state, it's exhilarating and fun, but you're also like, I don't know what the hell's happening. Let's just do our best and try and make this work.
Faking it till you make it is the secret, is a good secret to growth that you have to do as an entrepreneur. And one of the things so in addition to my podcast, I'm now doing business advisory services and coaching other entrepreneurs how to grow, first of all, build a strong foundation for their business and then position them for that hyper accelerated growth that you're talking about. And one of the areas we really dial in on is what we call the struggle zone. And it's that moment of, like you just said, kind of making it up, trying different things. And we really try to coach entrepreneurs and advise them to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because most of the time in business, you're in that struggle zone. And the more you struggle, the more growth there is, but there's also that opportunity for burnout. So, do you have any advice or insights that can help us process when we're in that struggle zone, and knowing that the growth does come from struggling, but how do you prevent burning out in the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things to remember is if you are a super type A, motivated, driven, overachiever leader that's working a million hours a day or a week, you're not going to just instantly totally change your lifestyle and now have some 2 hour morning routine that involves meditating and exercising and journaling and drinking the teas. Like, that's not really realistic. And so I think what's important, and I feel like we can all read a book or listen to a podcast or see some interview, and then we're like, oh, we need to do that. And so as big achievers, we just keep adding things to our self-care list. I know I was certainly guilty of that as well. But I think it's really being realistic with ourselves. If we are already stretched super thin, how can we just incorporate small little changes into our day? Because slowly those things add up over time. Just like diet and exercise. We don't get to just like work out for 3 hours one day and eat super well. And then all of a sudden we're in fantastic shape and we're great for the rest of our lives. It doesn't work that way. We got to keep eating well and keep eating healthy for the rest of our lives to be healthy. The same exact thing goes with preventing stress and preventing and overcoming burnout. It's these small little moments of things that we can incorporate into our day. So there's this great study out of Gartner, the big research firm, that talks about proactive rest. And I love this concept. I talk about it in my keynotes all the time. And so often we think, particularly as leaders or entrepreneurs, that we have to earn rest. We have to be on death's doorstep exhausted before we take the vacation or take a day off or, take a nap, whatever it is. And this study talks about proactive rest. How can we use rest proactively so that we use it to prevent burnout and exhaustion in the first place? And there are countless ways that we can incorporate moments of proactive rest into our day. These can be simple things like having 50-minute meetings instead of 60-minute meetings. Because let's be real, most of the time you're done before 60 minutes. And there's always some moron asking more questions at the end when you're like, oh my God, I thought we were ready to go. Like, let's just be done. Give your teams those 10 minutes back in their lives. Give yourself that time back. One thing that I implemented on my team was meeting free Fridays. Now, again, I had about 75 people on my marketing team. I was not in control of the whole company. We had like 6,000 employees in our corporate employees. But as I'm sure you know, so often we are on call after call, meeting after meeting every day, all week. We get to Friday and we're like, I haven't done anything. I haven't done any of the work that I actually needed to do from all of these meetings and stuff. So I had meeting free Fridays so that my team could get through some of the work that they'd been piling up through the week so that they could hopefully go into the weekend with a little bit less stress on their shoulders, a little bit less weight on their shoulders. Another way you can incorporate proactive rest is just like turning the music off in your car. We are so bombarded with podcasts, notifications, emails, radio, music, audiobooks, all the things. And especially if you're a motivated achiever who thinks like, oh, I'm commuting for an hour. I need to make the most of my time. Let me listen to a podcast. Let me listen to an audiobook. God forbid I waste an hour in my car not accomplishing anything. But being able to just turn that music off, turn the podcast off, and just be in your car quiet during those small, short commutes, it just helps our nervous system reset. All of a sudden, we can think of solutions to problems that we haven't been able to think about things bubble up, we're able to just like calm down a bit. So there's a jillion different ways we can incorporate proactive rest into our lives, but it's a really simple thing to do. It's manageable and it's a small step in the right direction of getting a little bit more balance in our lives and being a bit more proactive about how we look at rest.
It's funny you say that about the no meeting. So I remember during the pandemic, I was an executive vice president at Rocket Mortgage, and I had a team of 200 people, and I was promoted to that role during the pandemic. So I'd never met any of them in person. It was all on Zoom, and we had vegan Thursdays, and it was a play on no meat. So we're not going to meet on Thursday. It was vegan Thursday and
Oh,
no
that's
meat.
funny.
It was kind of
That's
funny.
hilarious.
I think
I,
things were funnier during the pandemic. It's actually not that funny that I'm saying it now, but people laughed maybe because I was the executive vice president. They said, "Hey, great idea." But just I agree with that. Cutting down on the number of meetings, reducing the time, having an agenda in advance, right? What are you going to talk about? And it is okay to end a meeting before the time that you've scheduled for it. Give people
right? Yeah.
10 minutes back in their day to catch up on email. You had talked about the proactive rest, and you're speaking right to me on that as well. I'm a big student of some of these guys like Tony Robbins and Ed Milet, and they're talking about these morning routines. I've got an ice bath. I've got an infrared sauna. I've got,
Yeah.
when they started their business, they were broke. They had
Yeah.
nothing.
I'm like,
And
who the hell has that much time for that elaborate morning routine?
right. Yeah, half hour in the gratitude journal. Like
Yeah,
just be
exactly.
thankful. It's that simple. I
Yeah.
tried that for like 2 days and like, okay, I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful for what God did in my life. Now what? Like, just create that as a
Yeah.
mindset in the way you go through life as opposed to having to journal it. I do think that journaling is helpful to just kind of get things out of your mind and on paper, but doing it within the context of reality. Because when I am coaching entrepreneurs, they're like, "What's your morning routine?" I said, "Well, I'm running multiple businesses. I have 4 kids, and I'm at a different level than you are. You need to wake up and work. That's your
Yeah,
routine. Like
exactly.
start
Yeah, get
working."
some coffee,
Yeah,
take a shower, and work,
yeah, get to work, and then we'll worry about your infrared sauna routine when you start
Exactly.
making some money. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, and this is great so far. Thank you for again being a guest on our show.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the collateral damage of type A people? So I know I've experienced it. It's not just the damage that you do to yourself, but it's also the people around you, your team. If you're leading from a place of burnout, it can cause collateral damage to your team. And then also in your personal life and relationships, what are some of the warning signs that we can
Yeah.
look for? Because you're thinking, well, yeah, I need to block time for myself, but I also have to make payroll and come up with 100 grand by Friday. So how do I be aware of that, and what can I do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously a huge question. So we can break that up into a few different ways. So personally, I think so often burnout does not show up really noticeably until it's too late. Back if we go back to diet and exercise, when we start gaining a little weight, it's pretty noticeable. All of a sudden, our pants are a little bit tighter. That shirt or that jacket, the sleeves just feel a little bit tighter. You're like, okay, I put on a couple pounds, time to get myself dialed in. Let me work out a little more, drink a little less beer or wine, whatever. So it's easy and it's noticeable. Burnout's tricky and it sneaks up on you more. And a lot of times we don't realize it until it's too late and we are like deep in its trenches. And often that can show up as serious health issues, heart attack, cancer diagnoses, gallstones, kidney stones, miscarriages, things like that, fertility issues, which I talk very openly about and share in my book and my keynotes as well, that I struggled with and a lot due to burnout. But so it's being conscious of our health. In terms of our teams, I think this can take a lot of different it can iterate itself in a lot of different ways. So I actually just posted about this yesterday on my social media feeds. is the difference between abdicating and delegating. And I think so often when we are burnt out as leaders, we start abdicating our responsibility. We think we're delegating and just forwarding emails on to people to deal with, pawning off tasks and projects on people to deal with, but we're not setting them up for success. We think, oh, I've got Johnny working on that. But you haven't told him what you need, what success looks like. You haven't trained, you haven't done anything. You've literally just shoved something off onto somebody else on your team and not set them up for success, and really just don't ever think about it again. This abdication of our responsibility is really easy to do when we're burnt out. I know I was guilty of this as well, particularly when you get emails with like 7 people copied in on the email. It's so easy to just be like, there's 7 people on this email. Like, someone else will deal with this. I'm not going to deal with this. But if somebody calls me out, sure, I'll deal with it. But for our teams, that's hard. If we're burnt out, they sense it. You have a negative attitude most of the time. You're disengaged a lot of times. You're cynical. Like someone asks you how you're doing. You're like, oh, living the dream. Like, how many times do you hear people say that? They're obviously not happy about something, and that rubs off onto our teams. And so I think, the delegation versus abdication, like there are just so many ways that this can show up in our teams. That doesn't set them up for success. And it also ultimately, I mean, they always say misery loves company, and it can really affect your team.
Those are great points. And I wasn't in the room when you were talking to my producer, so I don't know if he threw some of these things at you to say to me during the podcast of
not at all.
Throwing things at him. So, no, I'm kidding. So very, very great point of being able to communicate what exactly you're expecting of your team is very important. And then what you're assigning them to do and being able to measure, making them feel good about giving them feedback of what you've assigned to them and what your expectations were and if they're meeting them. One of the things I talk about with entrepreneurs also is the process of where you are now, where you want to go, how you're going to get there. But the most important thing is, are you aware of what the cost is going to be to get there? And it's not money, it's not time, but it's everything that goes into it, the collateral damage to yourself, the people around you. And we just call it recognizing what season you're in. So sure, it's okay to grind 100 hours a week, but you have to understand the cost in other areas and what impact that is. There's just different seasons in life. Are you building a lifestyle business where you can take vacation and weekends off, or are you trying to build something with enterprise value and position for a multi-million-dollar exit? Neither one's the right answer. You just have to be aware of the decision you're making and the potential collateral damage that could go
like
along.
You're going to be missing date nights. You're going to be missing your kid's soccer game. You're going to be missing a lot of that stuff. Or if you're single, you may be staying single for a while, So it's like, and that's just one example of, are you willing to make those sacrifices to get what you want? Another thing that I talk about a lot, though, is this notion of redefining success. I think so often as leaders and as entrepreneurs and people that are very driven and motivated, we get so fixated on this thing that we want to accomplish or that we want to achieve that sometimes we can get down this path and forget why we're even doing it. Like, are we doing it just to say we've done it? Or is this going to add some value to our lives in a way? And a lot of times you can get the money, you can get the accolades, but then be so broken physically, mentally, emotionally, that you can't even enjoy the success because you're either not healthy enough or you've got no one to hang out with and you've got nobody to, have celebrate those big moments with. And so what does success look like to you? Is it being able to have your evenings and weekends off? Is it being able to take 6 weeks off a year or 6 weeks off twice a year, or go spend a couple months abroad, or, never miss dinner at home with your family, whatever it is, everybody has different definitions of success. But I think so often like I said, we just get so fixated on things that we want to achieve that we forget why we're even doing it.
That's really good. And I was going to ask you, so for our listeners out there that may be feeling burnout, they're not sure if they are or not, are there any practical questions they can ask themselves, or how do they evaluate themselves other than reading your book and listening to your keynote speeches, which I do encourage everyone to go out and buy your book today. And no, you didn't ask me to do that, but we will
I
put it
appreciate
in
that.
the show notes and make sure everyone can pick up a copy, because our audience is entrepreneurs and they live in this balance of burnout versus really pushing the grind. So what are some questions I can ask myself as an entrepreneur to take the temperature of my burnout level?
Yeah. So I actually have a whole burnout assessment on my website that's free that anybody can access. It's just at erinstafford.com/burnout quiz. And so that is a quick quiz. There's 100 questions, but they're not like complicated questions. It's literally like yes, no. Like you can go through this quiz in about 5 minutes.
Am
Okay.
I
It
going to
is
burn
not,
out taking the quiz?
no, it's very quick. But what it does is measure 6 different parts of your life. So health, work, faith, spirituality, your friends and family, finances, and fun. And so obviously I could have sliced this and diced this a million different ways, but at some point you just got to pick something and go with it, right? So I picked these 6 different areas of our lives. There's questions about all of them. And you can really quickly get a sense of whether I'm struggling on the health side, whether I'm struggling, with my family and my friends, maybe it's finances. You can really get a quick pulse check. So, couple examples like for health, are you having trouble sleeping? Do you have anxiety? Do you have high blood pressure? Are you really irritable and snappy with people or your
No.
partners?
Oh, sorry.
I feel like this comes out mostly with our partners,
Yeah.
because why is it that we just feel like we can snap at them and say the most horrible things sometimes? You're like, oh my God, I sound like such a jerk. Work, some of the things that I really struggled with when I was burnt out was like zoning out. I'd be on a conference call with a bunch of other people and I would just be like aimlessly scrolling Amazon or Instagram, buying more crap I didn't need. Like doing the mouse jiggle. I always talk about this in my keynotes where like you're sitting at your desk and you're there, but you're not really there. So you just sort of like jiggle your mouse every now and then to make sure that like you're still active on Teams and it doesn't look like you've just completely vacated the premises. Things with like friends and family. Have you been picking fights? Are you like hypersensitive? Do you have an aversion to physical affection? Like there's so many different things that show up in different ways in our lives, which is why, as I was saying earlier, it can be really hard to tell if we're burnt out because it can affect all of these different areas of our lives.
Well, I love the assessment idea or the quiz because it really helps narrow down and makes it real to you, because we can all talk about burnout, whether we are or not, but kind of going through a process and seeing what the outcome is. And then once you see that you are in that place, but again, you're balancing, how do I make payroll by Friday? Hey, I've got my kid's soccer game I have to go to. Like, how do you get out of this place?
Well, again, it's going to look different for every person. But like you were talking about, thinking about what seasons you're in, there are going to be times, particularly as leaders and entrepreneurs, where you got to just put your head down and put in the hard yards. But is there a way, if you're doing that for 3, 4 days, a week, can you then take an afternoon off? Can you get to bed early one night? Can you lay off the alcohol one night so that you can sleep better that night? Can you make up for it a few days later in some small proactive rest way? Again, we're not going to change people from working 80 hours a week to now all of a sudden have this perfectly balanced life where they're only working 20 hours a week. It's not going to happen. People that are leaders and entrepreneurs, they thrive off that. They love it. They love the excitement. They love building something out of nothing. But how can we incorporate these small moments into our days and our weeks? And so, again, we know that there are going to be these periods of time where we're grinding it out and working our butts off. But how do we then make up for that the next day or the next week or the next month with a day off, a weekend away, with, a half day where we don't have meetings. One thing that I used to do all the time was I would block out 2 hours for lunch every single day across my schedule. Now, I sure as hell was not taking a 2 hour lunch break. Let me just tell you that. I wasn't even taking a lunch break. But what it meant was that I wasn't getting booked for meetings during those 2 hours in the middle of the day. And, because people can access your calendar and put all this crap in your calendar. And so I was, I would just, before I started doing this, I would just look at my days and I'd be like, I literally don't have time to pee. Like, how am I ever going to get through this day? I don't have a minute to do the work that I need to do or to like get some lunch or anything. And so I just started blocking out some chunks of time in my calendar, and it helped so much. Just give me some time to actually do some of the work. I liked having it blocked in the middle of the day because then it was like, okay, I could maybe do a couple things that came up from the morning. I could maybe prep a little for something that was happening in the afternoon. But it just gave me a little bit more of a feeling of control over my schedule and over my day.
I love that time blocking, and the current Monday through Friday work week is relatively new in the history of the human race. So
Yeah.
what I typically do, again, a failure to plan is planning to fail. On Sundays, I'm very diligent and specific on looking at my week. What meetings do I have to have? Which ones could I shorten to maybe an email or a shorter conversation, and then blocking time for myself to actually do that. So I find on Sundays when all the email traffic is quieter, again, it's just
Yeah.
finding something that works for you and that you're consistent with, and you can really get some meaningful time for yourself, catch up on work, and then also being intentional with my family, scheduling time
Yeah.
with my wife, dinner dates, whatever it is. If it's not on the calendar for me, it doesn't exist. So if I don't put it on
Yeah.
there, something else will come up, and definitely not a professional at it, but just the thought of doing it, again, just being intentional with your time. And
One thing,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was gonna add something to that. One thing that I love to tell people is I came up with this thing I call the Coco Chanel takeoff, and it plays right into what you were talking about. So Coco Chanel, obviously very famous French fashion designer behind the brand Chanel. She has this great quote, and she talks about dressing with accessories. And she says, before you leave the house, take one thing off. Her point being, less is more when it comes to dressing with accessories. And I always say, before you start your week, take one thing off. And so same sort of concept on a Sunday, take a look at your calendar and how can you just take one thing off your calendar? Is that a meeting that could really be an email? Or maybe you're having an email war with somebody and you just need to pick up the phone for 4 minutes and that would be fixed. Maybe this is the week your kids carpool to soccer practice with somebody else. Maybe you've already got plans 3 nights this week and it's stressing you out. Like, reschedule one of those, or better yet, cancel. Like, we always think we got to reschedule. I'm like, no, 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 you have permission. You can just straight up cancel the plans if you don't want to do it. So how can we look at our schedules on a Sunday and take one thing off?
That's great advice. And one thing I was going to ask you just before that is, you also are a hyper growth business leader. So now that we've kind of addressed the burnout piece, can you talk to us about growth? Because that's really what we're after. That's what's driving the burnout, as we're trying to grow and get out of this struggle zone and get to the accelerated growth phase. Do you have any practical tips on how we can do that?
Oh God. Hyper growth is not for the faint of heart. Let me just tell you that. I am just so thankful that I have been able to like cultivate some of these burnout strategies and tools because it's no joke. It's really no joke. I mean, a lot of this stuff you already know, but like hiring the right people is so paramount. I feel like one of my gifts is in hiring. I think, however, I have no formal training in hiring people other than I needed to hire a bunch of people for my team. But I somehow have been able to cut through the bullshit and like really be able to see if this person is going to fit culturally, if this person's going to be a good fit for what we need on the team skill wise. I think there is absolutely no comparison to just hiring the right people that you need for your team. Because if you hire somebody that sucks, oh God, they slow you down. They slow the rest of the team down. They drag everyone down with you. So hiring, I think, is one of the absolute key things. Um, another thing in terms of like keeping your teams happy during like a hyper growth environment is really understanding what makes them tick. I have another free resource that I call like what fills your tank. And so a lot of people talk about like the five languages of love. Like, are you an affectionate person? Do you like words of affirmation? This form that I created, which again is free on my website if you want, but it's all about really understanding what lights your team up. How do they like praise and recognition? Do they want it from their colleagues? Do they want it from you, their immediate leader? Do they want it from the CEO? Do they want it from a patient or a client? Do they, in terms of like what they want reward wise, is it, I just want cold hard cash in my bank account, that's all I care about? Is it, I just want an afternoon off so I can do whatever the hell I want? Maybe they want the flowers and the cookies and the chocolates or the gift card to Amazon or whatever. What is it that fills their tank up? How do they like to be praised? What do they like in terms of gifts? And this simple thing, I would have everybody on my team fill it out. And anytime it was time to promote someone or give them praise or give them some sort of shout out throughout the week or the month, I would refer back to those notes and be like, okay, Jessica likes boop, 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 boop. Okay, let me make sure I get feedback from the rest of the team that we can share with her and that'll make her feel good. So ways that you can speak to your team that they like to be spoken to.
Yeah, so I agree with that 100%. It's hiring the right people and firing the wrong people. Yeah, it's never a surprise when you let someone go. Like the rest of the team was just kind of wondering why they were still here. So if they're not a
Yeah.
cultural fit, you're not helping them or anyone else in your company. Uh, it is your job as the leader to find what motivates them and make sure you align your business and KPIs to what's going to help them feel
Yeah.
fulfilled and satisfied in your environment. Um, with the growth piece as well as hiring a team, is there any things that I should be doing as the leader just to get me thinking about growth? Because when you're in that grind and underwater, it's tough to have vision and continue to pursue it.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to just add one more thing before we switch gears a tad, and that is, oh my God, I just totally lost my train of thought.
That's right. We can edit it. So take your time.
I had
Yeah.
a good point to make to add to that, and I just totally lost my train of thought.
You're burnt
Um,
out.
no, I'm actually not. I
Okay.
actually feel so good about the fact that I've learned some tools that have kept me from burning out. Okay, wait, tell me your question one more time. What should you be thinking about as the leader when
Yeah.
you're in a growth phase?
Well, when you're in that kind of burnout moment, right? Like, how do you even think about growth?
Hard. I mean, I think that's where we get back to what does success look like to me? Get back to the why. Why am I doing this? What is my like founder story? What is my story that's keeping me going? How can I get myself bought back into the reason why I started this business in the first place? The reason I joined this team in the first place? What is it that's keeping me here? What is it that excited me about this? And what does success look like for me? Simon Sinek, his whole start with why, like there's something to that. Like, why are you doing everything that you are doing? Why are you working so hard? I think sometimes it's very easy for us to get on this treadmill, this hamster wheel of just going, 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 that we forget why we're actually doing the thing. And being able to remind ourselves of that when we're feeling burnt out is huge. But it's also learning tools to help you, because there is no amount of like yoga and acupuncture that can just get you out of this. We really have to make some mindset shifts. We really have to make some changes in our lives, There are so many days where I'm sitting at my desk working and I'm like, I could literally sit here for the next 24 hours and still not get everything done. But my husband just got home from work and I don't want to sit here forever and do this. I'd like to actually spend time with him. So, you know what? I'm just going to call it a day. This will have to wait till tomorrow. And I think that's hard for a lot of leaders and a lot of entrepreneurs because we think, oh, I got to get this done. I got to get this done. I got to get this done. But ultimately, you're in charge. You're the leader. It doesn't have to be done today. So obviously, sometimes some things do. But there's a lot of times where we just keep pushing when actually we could just stop for a moment and go spend time with our loved one or work out, whatever it is that brings you those moments of joy.
Well, I think there's a balance, and I like Simon. He's got great content, but I think, as with anything in America, as we take it to the complete extreme and everyone's sitting around doing nothing, trying to find their
Yeah,
why. So I tell
true.
people, find your why not. Why not get out there
Yeah.
and start a business? Why not
Uh-huh.
try to grow and scale a company?
I love that.
Because like, just why not do it? So, and again, there's a happy medium there in finding what your purpose is, but it also takes action to make progress. That action will give you feedback, and then you can continue to make better decisions down the road. So, as we wrap up here, we got connected through a great friend of mine, Josh Linkner. I know you've been a part of Impact 11. I actually attended the event in Detroit. It was top notch. Just
Yeah.
everything they do is the highest level. He's been a great inspiration for me as an entrepreneur, just the way they lead their business, the community that they've established through Impact 11.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your experience there, and then also just your journey as a keynote speaker.
Yeah, so I have been working with Impact 11 and Josh since he first started his company, which was like back when it was called Three Ring Circus. So it's been a number of years. And he really helped me put a message together that resonated with me and my level of expertise and my background, but that also would sell in the market. And I think that is what they're particularly good at. You can be an expert on whatever the heck you want to be an expert at, but is it going to sell in the market? How can you put a spin on your expertise so that you're still authentic and aligned with your background and your expertise, but it's spun in a way that it appeals to a bunch of different organizations and associations? So they are the best at teaching you how to cultivate a message, how to create a keynote, stage presence, how to learn the business of being a speaker, how to work with speakers bureaus, what needs to be on your website, in your speaker reel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I have learned so much from them. Josh and Ryan and Pete and Seth, who run Impact 11 now, are all dear friends of mine now. And I have just met so many incredible other speakers in the community that have helped me grow my speaking career. We all help each other. We pass gigs off to each other. If we can't do them, we endorse each other's books. We promote each other's books on social media. Like, it's just fun to have your hype group of people that get what you do and that want to love and support you and who you love and support as well. So I can't say enough good things about them. That's my 2 cents for Impact 11, and I am not paid to say this. I just genuinely believe in the organization that much. And then you were asking about my journey to become a speaker. So I've always spoken on the side in my various capacities of working. I was a advertising executive at MTV Networks Europe. I ran a number of different ad agencies. I was a reporter for years. I was a celebrity stylist in Hollywood for many years. So I've had this kind of diverse background, and I've always spoken at various conferences or on panels and things like that. And I just decided that I wanted to go for it. And it was time. I'd been at my last company for 6 years. Obviously, we'd been through the pandemic, we'd been through this huge growth phase. I had grown my team from 3 people to 75 people. The company had grown. I'd launched new brands, like all the things. And it was just sort of time. I was ready to do something else. And I became friends with another speaker. And he was the one that was like, okay, well, if you're serious about this, you got to go to Impact 11. They'll teach you how to be a speaker. And so I did. And yeah, so I've been doing this full time now for a couple years and it's been fun. I love it. So much fun.
That's such a good point, and I get approached with people all the time. Hey, I want to get out there and tell my story, and it's a business just like anything else, and it's probably one of the toughest businesses because you're fighting for people's most valuable assets, which is their attention and their
Yeah.
time. Like you mentioned, there's a million podcasts that you can listen to, but the best one is the House of Bricks. No, I'm kidding. There's
Obviously.
so many options out there, but it's tough. I've started multiple businesses, but this is probably the most difficult because I'm the actual product. I'm not selling healthcare analytics software or mobile technology or training. It's actually me and my product and voice, kind of like what you're doing as a keynote speaker. And how do you get people to pay you when there's so much available for free? So
Well, and it's not just, okay, what's you and your story? It's how does your story apply to me sitting in the audience? Like, why should I care what you're telling me? Like, cool, great, you've started all these businesses. How does that affect me? What have you learned that's going to make my life better and my life easier? And so it's like, it's not just standing up there and telling your story, it's constantly putting yourself in the shoes of the audience of like, what are they going to get? So you have to always shift your story a little bit so that it's about them, even though it's still your story. And that's kind of the stuff that I feel like you learn throughout the process.
that's a great point. I compare it to the guy that wears his high school varsity jacket to the 10-year high school reunion. Like, hey man, we graduated a long time ago, and yes, you're
Yeah.
the captain of the football team, but where are you going in the future? So it's not an Adam House memoir. It's it's a vision of where the House of Bricks is going to go and why you would want to join our movement, similar to what Impact 11 is doing. They've created a movement of people helping them package their story that makes it relevant to the audience and makes them want to be a part
Yeah.
of where you're going and not where you've been.
Yeah, and like so often you see this with Olympians who have won medals or done something great in the Olympics, and then they think, "Oh, I'll go be a speaker now." And it's like, "Okay, well, great. That's awesome that you were an Olympian, you won all these medals, but like what's the story? Is it about resilience? It is about determination? Is it about adversity? Like what else can you tell me aside from, oh, I worked my ass off for 20 years and won a gold medal? You know, and so you see this a lot with Olympians that maybe sometimes, yes, they have the notoriety, they have the gold medal or whatever, but sometimes they struggle with how to actually tell their story to a wider audience that really that where it will resonate with them.
Part of our business advisory services is not just working with entrepreneurs, but also professional athletes. So
Oh,
similar
perfect.
to an
Yeah.
Olympian, right? And the
Same difference.
athletes
Yeah.
that I am drawn to are the ones that were able to do something after their profession. So they started a business or they're investing in the community. Like, Shaquille O'Neal was one of the most dominant basketball players ever. Well, now he's an incredible entrepreneur, owns hundreds of franchises, starting everywhere I see Shaq's got his investment in something else. And so those are the guys, like, when you're able to, after whatever mountain you climb, is how you get to the next mountain and continue to have influence. So as we look to wrap up, and again, just summarizing what we've talked about, the burnout stage, just that self-awareness, people can go on your website, take the assessment. I encourage people to do that, take the time, just because that self-awareness is the first step in really being able
Yeah.
to recognize where you are, where you want to go, what it's going to take to get there, and the cost to get to where you want to go, and if you're up for that challenge. But anything else you want to leave our audience with as we wrap up?
I just want to leave them with the fact that one, burnout can happen to you. I know as a lot of driven leaders, we think burnout's BS. It's not going to happen to me. That's something that happens to other people, weak people, lazy people. You know, it can happen to you 100%. And there is a way out. There are tools and tactics that you can learn and develop that don't always happen overnight, but you are able to ultimately stay at a level of success and peak performance and do it without burning out. But it takes some time, it takes some work, like anything worthwhile, and it takes a little determination, but it is possible.
Well, I want to thank you for being a guest on the House of Bricks podcast. It's been super informational for me. I'm learning things as we're talking. I'm going to go on your website, take the evaluation, see where I'm at, because we're often blind to our own deficiencies in the situation we're in. That's where assessments and coaching and advisory services also can help, is getting a fresh perspective from someone that is not in your business and in your day-to-day, where they can give you objective advice of where you are and where you want to go and how you're going to get there. So again, I want to thank you for being a guest on the House of Bricks podcast. Erin, have a great day.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.